15 years, but that's okay. We're going to have a few sets of questions afterwards, so feel free to ask anything you want. I was not planning to be too technical in this presentation because I have no idea of your technicity level, but feel free again in the questions afterward to ask whatever you're willing to know about our farm. So basically, you might know that we are located in France, in Normandy. And the particularity of the farm that we funded in 2003, well, we've acquired the status as farmers, which is really difficult to get here in France, in 2006. But as early as 2003, we started with the self-sufficiency because it was Charles, my husband's, and my dream. So we wanted to go toward self-sufficiency at a family level. So it was a very, very tiny farm. And then when we started farming for real in 2006, there was no other choice really but to do whatever we've been doing in the family garden on the farm. That's why from day one, we didn't even wonder. We went straight to organic certification and to agroecology, even though at that time we knew nothing about permaculture. So I guess we can say that now we've always been a production farm, production-oriented farm, but year after year, since we've been searching for both techniques, ideas, influences almost all over the world and in all types of traditions, we are quite an experimental farm rather than a production one. And we'll see at the end of the presentation that now in 2020, it's even more accurate than it was before. So even though we started producing vegetables from day one in 2006, pretty early on the way, which is 2011, we started experimenting a lot of things on the farm, and we welcomed a few studies. So some universities, some scientists came to the farm, and they were pretty curious about what we were doing, because at that time, hardly anybody was talking about permaculture in France, at least not in the farming field. Permaculture was really limited to self-sufficiency oriented organizations, communities maybe, but none of the French farmers would even know what it was all about. So in 2011, when some scientific from AgroParisTech came to the farm, they were pretty interested in what we've been working on for a few years. Which is a very, very tiny farm, actually a main heart of the farm, which is not bigger than 5,000 square meters, on which we are growing vegetable on, let's say, last year. I have to think about it because it differs from one year to another, but we usually grow vegetables on something like 2,500 square meters up to 3,500. On on those plots, we only work by hand. So we have a few other fields in which we use the horses. So we work with horsepower, but on those small plots of land, everything is done by hand. So when AgroParisTech came to the farm, they said, okay, look, why don't we try and see if your model is up to what the maraîchers parisiens used to do in the 19th century. So we're going to isolate 1,000 square meters on the farm and calculate and record every single thing you do on those 1,000 square meters. So either we were weeding, working the soil, harvesting, whatever we were about to do, we had to time it and to put all those data on different sheets. And the people from AgroParisTech would study those sheets. And the goal
Perrine?
yeah.
Are you sharing your screen right now? Because we only see the participants.
You can't see it, is it?
No, no.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
It's okay. Sometimes screen share only allows you to share the PowerPoint, even though you're already in exhibition mode. So there's like 2 pages then, but you have to pick the one that's the big slides.
I think now you can share screen. Is it possible, Perrine?
I'm trying to.
Sorry, on the bottom.
Can you see or not?
No, not yet.
Oh.
It's on the. It's like the green.
Yeah, I know.
Thing.
I've done
Oh yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah. We really don't have luck tonight. It's it's silly, but
I'll do it again. I'll try again.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks promising.
Yeah. Now it's working. Okay, now we see.
We see the bottom of.
Yeah.
We see the top of your. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Now it's good. Now it's perfect.
And then full screen. Perfect. There we go.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, sorry.
Is it okay?
Yeah, now it's perfect.
That was the first slide, second, and the third one I was talking about. So the goal was to measure whatever we would harvest on 1,000 square meters. The 1,000 square meters were based on what the maraîchers parisiens used to do in Paris in the 19th century. You might know that at that time, Paris was self-sufficient in terms of fruits and vegetables production. Of course, everything was different at that time, but still, I mean, to us, it was really a goal to achieve, to do exactly the same. So we started this study with the AgroParisTech, and then, I'm sorry, yeah, here we go. We found out that after 5 years of monitoring those 1,000 square meters, we had managed to create what we now call micro-fermes, i.e. very small scale farms, which are easy to manage, especially close to urban areas, vicinities and stuff. You need very few land, 10 times less land than when you set a big farm. You don't have to invest much money. According to us, you have potentially for the farmers. So we really found out that those small scale farms were exactly the model we wanted to develop and to share. And on top of it, the economic viability was proven. So it was very good for us. So to come back to the start of the farm, we've created in 2006. It's now 20 hectares wide. But again, among those 20 hectares, we grow vegetables only on, let's say, 3,500 square meters. We've got a lot of trees, lots of plants. We've got a lot of woods also. Almost 70% of the farm is wood, which explains why we only have 3,500 square meters covered with crops, with vegetables. At first, what we were thinking when we created the farm was to recreate those sceneries we used to know in the 50s in France. I'm not too sure you can see the slide yet, but you have a painting here from the painter Poydras in French Brittany in the 50s. And we wanted really to reseek those edible sceneries. That was our dream somehow. But we were very idealist, not very aware of what we were supposed to do when it came to farming. And despite this naive path, we managed to make our way because maybe thanks to that actually, because we're not influenced by any type of farming education or anything alike. So it was very interesting to us to find out about permaculture in 2008, because as I mentioned earlier, nobody in the farming world was talking about permaculture at that time. But to us, it really made sense when we found out about it, because we wanted, on one hand, to preserve the environment, and on the other hand, to produce a lot. And thanks to this production, to make a living, of course, to make a decent living. But with organic agriculture, we hadn't found a way to do it, to do that yet, to achieve that yet. But thanks to permaculture, we tend to foresee the eventuality where we could do both, protect the environment and be, economically speaking, really confident and viable. So as you might know, permaculture was created or inspired by Bill Mollison and David Omdam in the 70s in Australia. And the goal is to create sustainable organizations, environmentally friendly or sustainable, equally, humanly just, equitable, and of course that can provide a decent living for the farmers, which is something French farmers are struggling to find even nowadays. It's difficult to make a living with farming, especially when you produce vegetables here in France, unless you're a very, very big farm. So when we found out about permaculture, we realized that all the services rendered by nature could have an added value in our system and could enhance the productivity of our systems. So basically, when we found out about the design concept and permaculture, we've tried to apply all the principles we could find. And one of the most inspiring one maybe was that when you talk about permaculture, in a system, 1 + 1 is not equal to 2. It's most of the time equal to 3. And every single function in a system shall be rendered by different elements, and every single element has several functions. And this ecosystemic way of seeing things and installing things on the farm really inspired us a lot. So of course, we'd planted a lot of trees before, we'd created ponds, we've planted a lot of shrubs and stuff to make the ecosystem more lively, because when we took over, the farm was just grass, plain grass for cows. So the very first things we did was planting trees, which has been obsessing us really. And even nowadays, after 17 years, we are still trying to find space here and there to plant more trees and more trees. So after 1 year, and more obviously after 3 years, we really realized that all the services rendered by the ecosystem enhanced and made the productivity far better, because we had more diversity in terms of animals or insects, more diversity in terms of flowers, therefore we had a lot of pollinators. Since we had some diversity, some organic matter, to either to mulch the raised bed or to create some compost to feed the soil. So on every single issues, wherever we were looking on the farm, we were far better thanks to permaculture principle made into reality. And therefore, we understood that at the farm, we could make kind of a mix or a synthesis of ancient knowledge and the most recent scientific research. And that's where we started to try this method that we call the method of La Ferme du Bec Hélouin, pretty much inspired by the French market growers in Paris, as I mentioned earlier. You maybe you have it now on the screen, but you can see this picture of Paris with the Eiffel Tower in the background. Of course, it is a colorized picture, but you see right by the river scene, you have a lot of small gardens, and that's how they managed to feed Paris at that time. And there was so technical in their know-how that at that time they managed on a very simple plot of land to have 8 crop rotation. Which is pretty difficult. Even nowadays, we sometimes struggle to manage to achieve that. Amazing. Of course, they had a lot of hands. Everybody wanted to work and to give a hand to the family. But still, we still admire the know-how and the knowledge that the maraîchers Parisiens used to have. But the thing is that when we started to farm in 2006, all those techniques, all this knowledge was completely forgotten, even in France. And I know that almost all around the world, people talk about French farming. But believe me, when we started, nobody in France knew what we were talking about when we were talking about French farming. So we had to go and search and reseek all those techniques. And the funny thing is that we found out about those techniques thanks to one of our god, who's Eliot Coleman. Eliot, who's an American grower, used to come to France every single year to study what the last maraîchers Parisiens used to do. And he's managed to create a beautiful farm in Maine. And all his books were translated in French. And now people tend to know what used to happen in Paris or around Paris in the old times. But that's really, really thanks to him. So thanks to Eliot, we managed to revive this old technique that the maraîchers Parisiens used to use, which are the crop association. Used to associate a lot, and that's really to the productivity of our farm. Because again, we are a very, very small farm. We don't have much land, and this land was pretty poor when we took over. And therefore, we had to add a lot of organic matter, but also we had no choice but to produce a lot on a very, very, very small scale. And thanks to this seeder, precision seeder that Eliot Coleman invented, that he's created basically, we've managed to associate a lot of crops on a bed that, so our flat beds, they are 80 centimeters wide, 10 meters long, but actually we don't really care about the 10 meters. What is important is that they are 80 centimeters wide. And on those 80 centimeters, thanks to this precision seeder, we managed to sow 4 different types of vegetables at a time, which means where in a regular farm you would have 1 flatbed for carrots, 1 flatbed for radishes, another one for, let's say, Chinese cabbage, and another one for onions, for instance. On our farm, you're going to have exactly the same bed for those 4 crops. And again, to me, that really is still nowadays the key to the productivity and the economic viability of the farm. Another
Perrine?
Yeah.
Perrine, your audio had fallen out on a few occasions, just really shortly, but some people had missed the measures or techniques that were mentioned a moment ago for the beds. Could you repeat those? And then another question is, what source of manure did they use with the ancient agriculture in Paris?
Okay, in Paris, they used to have a lot of manure at the time, of course, with all the horse carriage they have. So they had as many as they could. Actually, horse manure is the best type of manure you can use for vegetable crops or any type of agriculture, if I would say, because the ratio between carbon and nitrogen is the best. And still nowadays, that's what we use also, horse manure. And as far as the figures are concerned for the flatbeds, it's 80 centimeters wide, 10 meters long, but the 10 meters long doesn't really matter in reality. You can have a 5 meter or 20 meters long if you want. But the 80 centimeters wide is very important to be able to use the precision seeder. So another source of influence was John Jeavons. I'm going to go pretty fast on this one because it's bio-intensive micro-agriculture. If you want to see any reference regarding the work of John Jeavons, you can go and search on the internet. This was very interesting to us, but John Jeavons has focused on family scale farming or food production, if I shall say properly. So it was interesting to see that somebody else before us had said that on a very small scale you could produce a lot, but he was not the main source of inspiration. One of the big sources of influence were the raised bed, the hugel culture that people know almost all around the world. In a lot of traditions, they've been practicing this type of agriculture. It's been very useful. So it's not the same thing than the flat beds the maraîchers Parisians used to use. Here we're talking about raised beds, so it's a small hill. The hill is composed of compost. It's not lasagna with compost. It's soil of corn, nourished with compost here and there, and with mulch. Here you see the pictures in spring. So in spring, that's the only time of the year where the raised beds are not mulch. The soil is not covered. But after that, it's always covered. And basically what we do in the field is that we always work by hand. We've realized that working by hand, and it may seem funny actually, but working by hand is the only way we can be highly productive and competitive with regard to what any type of machinery would do. Why? Because we are so small that if you were to work with a machine, either a motoculture or tractor or whatever on the farm, then you wouldn't have enough space, so it would be counterproductive. Here, in those small gardens, because our farm might rather look like a big garden rather than a small farm, but it's okay with us. It's okay to be treated as gardeners and not farmers. Well, in our gardens, if you work by hand, then you can be very accurate, you can be very precise, and you can be efficient. So it's funny to think that in the 20th century, working by hand is far more productive than working with a machine. So step by step, our micro-farm became a very fertile agro-ecosystem, thanks to the permanent mulching, thanks to all the tree planting that we've installed, thanks to the ponds and the algae we can use also that come from the plant. I mentioned before, we a lot of space to trees. Trees are the DNA of the system, the spine, maybe I should rather say. Without trees, we wouldn't have enough microorganism, we wouldn't have enough water pumping, we wouldn't have enough minerals pumping coming from the soil, we wouldn't have enough organic matter. We wouldn't have enough fruits, of course, but maybe we wouldn't have enough food either for the animals. So the trees really on our farm are the roundabout of everything. And again, we've been planting as many trees as possible, and we keep wherever we can planting trees. And most of the time we plant vegetables at the bottom of the trees, and it works perfectly well. The cooperation between the trees and the crops is really, really efficient. That's what you see on the following slide. You can see vegetables growing in between trees. So of course, you've got to measure the spacing between the trees, of trees, to make sure that all your vegetables will receive enough for the photosynthesis. But still, the compatibility of trees and crops are amazing, and the cooperation is extremely efficient. And year after year, we've managed to prove that, and to prove the efficiency of this cooperation. Also, beside the trees, our main focus goes to the soil. Soil is really, really important to us. So on a daily basis, we try to nurture the soil, to nourish it. We mulch it almost all year long. I just mentioned earlier that the only exception to that is spring. Beside that, it's just like in Mother Nature. In Mother Nature, you never see bare soil. It's the same at the farm. No bare soil. The soil shall always either be covered with mulch, so decomposing organic matter, or living plants, growing plants. Every single time you have some rooting system alive in the soil, then you can make sure your soil is going to be efficient, is going to be lively, is going to be rich enough to produce other vegetables. So at the farm, we based our work and ethics on the permaculture ethical principle. We're creating a lot of jobs along the year. Now we are transitioning a little bit, but it's not a little, we are transitioning a lot because 15 years of intensive, we decided that we wanted to go even further toward research, scientific research. And you know, after the first lockdown in France, we thought that it was just impossible to keep on going that way, because food production, but most certainly the way that we the way that we bring the food from the field to the table here in France, but I know it's the same in other countries, is going upside down. It's completely crazy. And we would like now to focus more on the resilience of the farm, and we'd like to conceive small-scale farm that will be self-sufficient in terms of energy, in terms of seeds, in terms of everything, self-sufficient, but at the scale of the community, at the scale of the territory. You know, for instance, we are located in a small village. It's a 400 inhabitants, and we would like to measure from now whatever is necessary to make sure that our farm will be the farm of the village. And what does it take to feed the village? How many tons of vegetables shall we produce? How much meat, if necessary, shall we produce? How many eggs per year, etc., etc. We would like to recreate a complete producing and sustainable ecosystem, so that if we have to experiment one crisis after another, now we have a health crisis, but it's going to lead to an economical crisis, and the economical crisis is going to lead to a social crisis, and so on. And we know we have the climate crisis going on. So when all the crises are there, what are we going to feed the people around us? So we have from now to think, and to think urgently about the way we're going to feed the people in the coming years, and I even should say in the coming month. So we are trying to focus more and more on those solutions and the way we could organize things and convince the politics, for instance, that we shall be able to feed the people with produces that are grown locally. So it's quite a challenge. we aim at this, and now we have several research programs going on. One is dedicated to forest garden. I mentioned several times that the trees are the spine of the project, but I didn't speak properly about the forest garden, but we're leading now a study on forest gardens. In fact, we'd like to know, just like we did for vegetable market growing, if a forest garden could provide a decent living for one person over a year. We have an experiment going on also on wheat, which is not harvested or grown the way we know the way we know it is done nowadays, not with a tractor, not with any mechanical tools, but only by hand. We are trying again to reseek the knowledge of the ancient. And also we keep on working on tools, because we understand that tools are the key of the efficiency, since we do everything by hand and non-mechanical tools. We have to have the best and the most efficient tools if we want to become or remain as efficient as possible. So in fact, our very small system is a bit of a challenge for the agriculture of the future. What type of farming do we want for the world of tomorrow? Do we want huge farms with a lot of machinery depending on fossil fuel, or do we want to reinstall local, very small structure? You know, we imagine for France, but I guess it is also good for other territories, kind of a network of small farms here and there that could create a lot of jobs, that could create happiness, that could create a lot of dynamic in the territory, especially in rural areas where we're located, but also at the doors of big cities that could fit also. So we are kind of having a fight between Day and Goliath, the big one, the huge one, and the small ones. I do not foresee the future agriculture as a clear opposition between those two models. I guess the big farms will keep on producing close to the small entities, but it seems that the consumers are more and more demanding on high quality products based on at least organic agriculture, and even better, either biodynamic or permaculture oriented techniques. So I think this type of model has a greater future both in France and in Europe. And we think that that's the only way we're going to manage to capture carbon into our soils, to maintain the water that is rarely here, even in Normandy in France nowadays. So we have to keep the water as much as possible into the soil. We have to maintain biodiversity, either biodiversity of the plants or the animals, and we do not even talk about crops here. Biodiversity of the crops is key, of course. So we do foresee a future where, you know, we could take over an average French farm. French farm is approximately 120 hectares, and on those 20 hectares, instead of having one man on one machine, one tractor, we could have several growers, one vegetable growers, another one who would produce eggs, another one who would produce meat, another one would produce cheese, another one would produce fruits, another one would produce plants or even flowers, who knows. And all those producers, they could not only be able to produce, but also to mutualize certain services. And you could have very modern farmers who could go on holiday from time to time, because they are never alone. They always work as a team. So to us, it is the key of not only the future of agriculture, but also the key to make sure that people who are not coming from a farming background will come back to the land at some point and will take over a farming activity. So let's imagine an agriculture that will replace fossil fuel with sun. That would be a dream. An agriculture that maintain or enhance the soil, capture carbon, produce a lot of quality food, creating jobs, and a lot of dynamic in the territories. That's exactly what we are aiming for with this type of small-scale farms like the Bec Hélouin farm. I think that's it for my presentation. I try to keep it as short as possible because what I would be pleased is if you have a lot of questions, and I would be happy to answer the questions. So I'm going to quit sharing the screen. And here we go.
All right, Perrine, we have quite a few questions that are coming in based off of everything you said, because you've said a lot, which is lovely.
Yeah, sorry, it was very fast and a lot, but we don't have much.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe we could do some small practical questions. Louise, would you like to ask those?
Yeah, so maybe we can first have some clarifying questions about the practical stuff, and then then we can have a short break, and then we can go into more like the bigger discussion questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are quite a few practical questions. The first one is how do you water, and which plants do you water? Do you water all plants, and how? Yeah.
Good question. So remember that we're located in Normandy. So even though we've seen the difference for the past few years with the climate, unfortunately, we still have a lot of rainfalls. But still, we do water all the plants in the greenhouse. I guess there's no question about it, that's for sure. Outside of the greenhouse, we tend not to water at all. We have sprinklers, but we use them only when we seed, when we do some sowing, or we transplant some small seedlings. And then for something like a week, we're going to make sure that those little seedlings will have enough water. Therefore, if necessary, we do water, but otherwise everything is conceived so that our plant will be able to manage by themselves as much as possible. What we want to do, is that their rooting system goes into deeps as soon as possible and as quickly as possible to be self-sufficient. Because as you might have seen on some pictures, we've created some ponds everywhere and some swells so that all the rooting systems of the plant can at some point find the water.
Thank you. I think I'm going to read a few questions from the chat, and we'll see if we can get all of them covered. Well, yeah, we'll see how far we get before the break.
Good.
And there'll also be space afterwards, I think. Yeah. You mentioned that seeding was the only mechanized activity. Is that completely true?
Can you repeat that?
That the seeding is the only mechanized activity on the farm.
There's nothing mechanized.
Okay.
Everything is done by hand.
Okay, perfect. Then we have a question about the soil compaction. How do you deal with the soil compaction on the permanent raised beds?
Permanent raised beds, there shouldn't be a problem. If you treat them properly, if you mulch them, then you shouldn't have compaction, especially if you mulch them properly over winter time. Winter time is the key. The rest of the time, you have a lot of rooting system, and the rooting system are the tool which will avoid compaction. If you haven't been lucky and you didn't have enough time or matter to mulch the raised beds, then you can use the grelinette. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the grelinette, which will enable some little holes to be made in the beds. But most of the time, if you've done your job properly, i.e. mulch and rooting system on place, you don't have any compaction. You have a little bit of erosion, which is normal, but shouldn't be any compaction.
Cool. We also have a question about the workload. You've been around working on the farm for a while now. Has the workload changed considerably throughout the years?
Well, the workload, I'm not too sure, but it's because of us and the choices we've made. The nature of the work has changed, because in the first years, we spent a lot of time doing some weeding, because we were starting from grass, you know, from a pasture, basically. So we spend a lot of time doing weeding. So the nature of the work has changed, because now we can focus more on technical things and we can be more efficient. We have more quality crops than we used to have. But the thing is that as far as we are concerned, you know, we are not only farmers, but we are also trainers and we are researchers, and we have a lot of media coming at the farm. So the workload, unfortunately, hasn't decreased just because we are what we are, because we've said yes to a lot of people for articles, for magazines, for TV shows, for training sessions and stuff. But as far as the farm itself is concerned, yes, if we were to do only farming, it would have decreased quite significantly.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah, we also saw a question about the mulch materials that you use. Are there any dominant ones, or do you use everything, or?
Whatever comes from the soil shall go back to the soil. That's the principle. So of course, in the very first year, when the ecosystem is not mature yet, you don't have much to use. But after a few years, you have a lot of trees, therefore a lot of leaves, therefore tree cuttings, shredded wood, nettles. We have a lot of nettles. We have comfrey that we use also. So anything that is usable, we use it. We don't use, how's it called? Cardboard. Because in organic agriculture, according to European rules, you're not supposed to be able to use cardboard. So I know that in a lot of permaculture books or videos, people use a lot of cardboard. But because of the ink and because of the glue that might be used and the content of those products, you're not allowed to use them. So we never use them. We only use organic issued things. And in the first years, you struggle a little bit finding enough of organic matter. That's the key, actually, of the balance of the system. So the very first years, we used to, there's a dog listening to us. In the first years, we used to get our neighbors or our friends, farmers, to give us either grass clippings or hay or manure or whatever. Now we tend to be, if not self-sufficient, because we are lazy, everybody's bringing some matter, but we could be, I guess.
All right. We also have a question from Clarine. Could you tell us something briefly about how you sell your produce?
So we used to sell, we had different schemes, but basically at the very first, we used to sell as an AMAP. AMAP is a French word for CSA, basket scheme, if you wish. So we had 80 baskets in the first years. Very, very soon, very early on the way, we started to work with restaurants. So we used to deliver restaurants in Paris. And then years after years, and we had also baskets at the farm locally. And years after years, we wanted to avoid going to Paris. We are 1 hour and a half away from Paris, driving. And we wanted to avoid to go to Paris and avoid going to big cities. So we've tried to sell as locally as possible. And we've managed to do that within a 30 kilometers perimeter. And we kept on selling at the farm and to restaurants also. Now, this year, we're going to stop selling products because we're going to focus 100% on the studies. of course, whatever is going to be produced will be sold, but to either organic shops or eventually to some, I don't know how you call them. I'm missing the word here. Some people who will themselves sell to shops. But we are not going to be selling to the farm anymore directly to the people who will come, because it takes a long time and we need a lot of time to focus on the study.
Okay, thank you. We are going to ask one last question. There are a few others, but maybe just for the sake of now, for the timing, I can combine two small questions here. So where do you get your tools that you don't make yourselves? And someone has seen that you use La Fabriculture Remettre, and wondering if it's a good tool.
Yeah, we use the tool from La Fabriculture is called La Campagnole. And actually we did not build the tool, but we conceived the tool in our heads, because it's completely related to the flatbeds we use and to the measurement of our flatbeds. And you understood that our flatbeds were made to fit with the Eliot Coleman cedar. So everything is related. So La Campagnole was really created in our heads, and Vincent Legris from La Fabriculture made the first prototype, and then he's building them and selling them. So yes, we love that tool, and it was really the best tool we could imagine to gain as much time as possible when growing on the flatbeds. So that's perfect. And I don't know what where do we get the other tools? The tool that we don't make ourselves, we love the PKS collection. I don't know if you've heard about those tools. They are copper-based tools, and they are supposed to avoid slugs to come too much in your soil. And we love them because, not because of the slug thing, because they are very light tools, very easy to use, very ergonomic, and we love them pretty much. And we like also whatever Eliot Coleman has designed, and that the company called Johnny's Selected Seeds, I think their name. It's a US company, and they sell everything that Eliot Coleman designed. So we love those tools too.
Lovely. Thank you. I know there are a few other questions we haven't answered yet. Maybe there'll be some time at the end. But for now, it's nice that we planned a small break-in for 5 minutes. So let's come back at 9:03. So Perrine, 9:03, just green light for you, and yeah.
Okay, I will answer some more questions.
Yeah, you could look in the chat too if you want, or if people want to ask you now. Yeah, but there is a break for 5 minutes anyway.
Okay, welcome back everyone from your small break.
Hey, you're back.
I hope you can hear me. Okay, well, let me know if there's a problem. But yeah, I guess we can move into, let's say, more philosophical, larger life questions now, and not just the practical ones, maybe. So yeah, I've tried to organize some of these already. Maybe we can start with one that I actually received from a registration form about whether you think your farm has been resilient during Corona times.
You mean what or why do you think?
Do you think, would you consider your farm resilient during Corona, and why, if so?
Oh yeah, of course, easily. Corona time is an easy time. Lockdown time was more difficult, maybe that was the question. But during lockdown, yeah, we were highly resilient. The lockdown in France lasts for something almost 2 months or 1 month and a half. I've never been to a supermarket once. So at a family scale, it shows you what you can do. Of course, I've got freezers in which I had a lot of stuff, okay? But I was baking my own bread. I had a lot of vegetables. Even though it was springtime, we had plenty to eat, so there was no problem at all. But so at a family scale, of course, we were completely resilient. And in terms of energy or seeds or whatever, we were not running out of anything. So it was easy to be resilient. And the people from the village who might not be clients on a regular basis were very stressed out, and they came to us more than they used to do in the past. And actually a lot of farmers had this problem in France. They encountered this problem that during lockdown, a lot of customers rushed to them to get the food, to get fresh vegetables and stuff. But when lockdown was over, well, it was over also. And most of the vegetable growers, they had sown a lot of stuff because they wanted to provide a lot. They said, wow, I've got 20 more clients than I used to have on a weekly basis. So it's going to be a good year. But after lockdown was finished, all the customers disappeared.
Oh, I don't know if that's sad or positive message.
It's
a bit mixed, yeah. But then it appears that it would be nice to upscale or maybe have more of these systems in place so that there is an option for people to choose this. So one of the questions is, to what extent is it possible to scale these systems, and what are the difficulties that arise with that?
Again, I mentioned the average French farm, 120 hectares. The key is not to make those small systems bigger. It's to duplicate them. It does work like an ecosystem. In natural ecosystems, i.e. not touched by human beings, you don't have large plots of monocultures or whatever. You always have intricate, small ecosystems, very efficient, but on a small scale, that interact with each other. That should be exactly the same for those small farms. Small entities cooperating with other small entities, hopefully with different types of production, either organic, plant-based production or animal-based production, whatever. But all those shall cooperate with each other, and the consumers shall be able to buy all those stuff at the same place. Everything that you're going to find in your plate, on your table, you shall be able to buy it from maybe the same farm. And those big farms will be composed of small plot of production, small ecosystems.
Very nice. Then how would you advise
will lead you to planting trees, to planting hays, to plant shrubs.
to grow. Yeah, I guess it's by trial and error, but do you have something specific on this?
And also, we've got a few information now about the communities. I mean, the guilds that shall be built when you have one tree. What are the companion plants you shall plant nearby? The forest garden system is perfect for that. So we have some information about the compatibility or the needs of the plants and the way they can provide for each other. But also, it's also, as you mentioned, it's also errands. You try and see if it works. When it comes to trees, it's a problem if you try and fail, because it's going to take a long time to change, and you're not going to be able to do something different next year. When the tree is planted, it is planted, and there's no other way to go back. So you have to be extremely careful. That's why the design of a forest garden system is very, very important, and you might have to spend months on a forest garden design work. It's even longer and far more technical than the global design of the farm. So to me, looking for some compatibilities, for some guilds, as we call them, in the literature, plus some experiment that the old people might have led close to your environment, is the key.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm wondering, and I'm also seeing this in the chat, about what is your vision of a collaborative local community of producers? This system that you were saying, it's a lot of ecosystems put together. Yeah, how do you envision this? And are there already some networks of micro-farms cooperating and working together?
We've described it in our book, which in our first book in French, it is called Permacture, Guérir la Terre, Nourrir les Hommes. In English, it's called Miraculous Abundance. And in French, we've called this community of farmers the Système Agraire Solidaire, so solidarity, farming system. It's kind of it's a little bit like a cooperative somehow, where you have different producers. In the middle of those productions, you have a common pot, if you want, a common account, in which can be shared, I don't know, the accounting fees, the secretary, the lady who's going to sell the products in the farm shop, etc. So you share a lot of expenses, and everybody is responsible of its own production, of its own success and its own failures, but everybody participate into the common task or common fees. I don't know how to say that, but in French law, the best system is the cooperative system. I don't know if it does exist in other type of laws, but I think the key to that, not only on a legal viewpoint, but on a human viewpoint, because I'm trying to help a lot of projects with the young project holders, and every single time such a community project fails, it's because of human factor. I mean, human problems, disagreements and stuff. It's most of the time it's not technical at all. It's really, really based on the human factor. And the better you design the project, both legally, morally, philosophically, or humanly, the better it's going to work. So you have to make sure that you're going to have a proper charter, a proper modus operandi, a proper way of functioning beforehand, before you even start, so that everybody understands how it should work, and you have a global design. Everybody knows that the design was made by all of them, but a design is changing. The design is like nature. Design is not fixed. You can change it. It does change because the life of the one or another has changed. You know, when you have a group of farmers, sometimes people are surprised that when somebody gets married or they have a baby coming in their life, well, maybe they're going to change. They're going to work less hours, and the dynamic is going to change. But that's normal. That's part of the design, and you have to accept beforehand that the design, even though it's been set and agreed to, shall change at some point. No ecosystem is never fixed.
Yeah. Maybe relating to what you said about nothing being fixed and like the dynamics changing, social dynamics. Pablo is asking about changing land ownership over time. So he's asking, how do you see the access to land problem going on in Europe? And what are some things you need to consider now for the future when you or others one day retire?
Yeah, big issue in every single country in Europe, the access to land. We've got a few organizations in France that are trying to if not fix this problem, at least to fight against this really big issue. And there's one company that has raised recently, and it's starting to buy the land and try to either rent it or resell it to producers after a few years, you know, when they are all set and everybody is going according to plan, and the farm is becoming economically viable. So somehow they're holding the ownership of the land for the first years, but just for financial reasons. I mean, the grower is king in its own kingdom, and he has the right to do whatever he wants, but he hasn't got proper ownership at first. And it might be a good idea, because up until now, we had another organization called Terre de Liens, who would ask a lot of investors to invest into a piece of land. But the problem is that the farmer would never become the owner of this land at any point. And it is psychologically speaking a real barrier here, because the project holders, they always have this fantasy of their own little farm that they will own at some point. It might be very French, but I know it's not only French, but in France, you really want to own your own farm. So it's been a problem up to now. But I think we're going to find more and more solutions. And what we see coming also is that some cities or some communities, they are buying some land, and they want the maraîchers, so the vegetable growers, to become a salaryman somehow, and to work for a salary on the farm. And it's good for young farmers, because when they are not ready to invest a lot of money, or when they don't have enough money to invest, they still have access to the land, but a different way. So, philosophically speaking, it raises a lot of questions, but it's worth thinking.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a relevant question for a lot of the attendants here who I know are interested in becoming farmers themselves.
Yeah.
And I think we have 3 remaining questions from what I can tell in the chat. And then, yeah, maybe we can just end with these and be done in about 10 minutes. So another question, now these aren't really maybe so related to what we were saying before, but what options are there for grain or potato production on a small scale where you normally need large areas?
Good question. I'm not sure I mentioned that, but our farm is 20 hectares in total, and we grow food on approximately 3,500 square meters, or a little more, depending on the years. And for the large scale vegetables, like crops like potatoes, squash, what else, onions and stuff, you have to make a choice, indeed. So if you're too small to produce all those, what could be done, and I have some friends who do that, you could share between farmers and choose who's going to grow those crops this year and who's going to grow them next year. That's pretty easy to organize. You just need to organize the way you sell the products, and it's even better to do it together. And that also comes back to the previous question. To me, the best way you can access to the land nowadays is to share. It's easier to buy a big farm when you've got 6 project holders, whereas one farm when you're one project holder is not affordable at all. Here in France, it's the case. When you take the average farm, it's something like €1,000,000 to get that farm. €1,000,000 for one person is something just like crazy. If you take 6 families and you share, then it's achievable. So it's somehow everything comes back to cooperation.
Thank you. Now we have a question about horses. Martina would like to know something more about the use of horses on the farm.
So the horses are used to work the soil, but we don't go into deeps. You know, you work on 5-centimeter deeps and nothing more. So they work mainly in spring when we prepare the soil, and then not so much. They do carry stuff when we have heavy stuff to carry. They do work for that. And they do some weeding, but not so much. And actually, talking about horses, I've seen one question earlier that is important. Somebody asked about the chemicals that might be in the manure, and the only thing you shall avoid in manure is a worm, how do you say that? A worm, you know, a product that would remove worm from the intestine of the horse. And there's one molecule you shall avoid, which is called in French ivermectin. I'm not too sure how it's called in English. And this is the only thing that's really bad. If you have other types of chemicals, if you decompose, you let the manure decompose and heat, that's the key, it has to heat, then you're free of any type of unwell product. But the only thing that will remain into the soil is this worm, this getting rid of worms, I don't know how to say it, products that is called ivermectin, that you shall not use. So it's easy to go to the people who rate the horses and say, okay, if you get rid of worms with this type of product, could you just switch to another one? Because it does exist on the market. You can find products free of this specific molecule, and it's very easy to do.
Okay, thank you. And I think this is a nice last question to end with. It's kind of holistic about the ideas you've been sharing about the farm. And Mathilde asks, well, she starts by saying, an agroforestry teacher and project designer once mentioned that he had seen none except your farm doing market gardening and growing fruit trees that could keep up the workload, work organization, and plant competition. So how can you explain this? And I think maybe we're all wondering, how can you explain it?
Yeah, it's true. It's not only us. Now, you know, well, we were maybe pioneers. And maybe we had a lot of lights coming from the media and stuff, but there are many, and thanks God, there are many other farms who are doing the same. You know, when was it? 2015 maybe, there was a study led here by our Chambre d'Agriculture, so agricultural chamber, AgroParisTech and different other entities about agroforestry. And they went all around France to see which farms, which small-scale farm were growing vegetables on the trees. And they found 20 farms at that time, which were really doing well. And they made a brochure about all those farms, every single farm. None had the same way to plant trees, to plant crops on the trees. So all the systems were completely different, but very interesting. So thankfully, there are a lot of other farms who not only are doing well, are viable economically speaking, maybe they have less media than we have, and we are lucky also to be in a very nice valley, in a very nice area. And there was something that we wanted to make sure to respect from day one was the beauty of nature. And maybe because the farm is beautiful, because the scenery is beautiful, that does explain why we've had so many people coming. And the fact also that we love to share, and we had a chance to meet a lot of people who were interested in what we were doing and who helped us share, who helped us understand. So we were very lucky on the way, even if it's been a very, very tough adventure. So many times we were about to be bankrupt, we were exhausted, we almost got a divorce 100 times, because it's difficult also to be farmers as a couple. But we were lucky enough to have all those people on our way, always willing to give us a good idea, to give us some advice, just to listen sometimes. And that's why maybe we had so much light on the farm, but really many, the word is spreading, and many other farms are coming, and many other farms are proving now that it is possible to do so.
So I think that the summary is that we should all share knowledge and our failures and our triumphs, and then we can learn from each other.
And share a lot.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. The evening maybe wasn't as smooth technically as we would have liked, but I think we all get a really nice picture of what your farm is like and what your experiences have been. And I certainly enjoyed it. So yeah, I would like to close the evening by saying that this has only been the first of a series of conversations with peasant farmers, and we're really looking forward to learning more from other farmers who have experienced hardships and continue to grow and inspire others. And I think this was a perfect start. Definitely a lot of interest around you, Perrine, and your farm, and it's really a beautiful project. So thank you. And I hope everyone also enjoyed, and that you have a good night, and that you join us in the future. And I will put a website in the chat, and you can keep up to date with our events. So thank you.
Okay.